Imagine a big, beautiful house that looks perfect on the outside, like a picture with everyone smiling. They have nice holiday dinners and tell happy stories passed down from grandparents. But some families, like the Guthries, have a different kind of story. Their real story isn't about what they said, but about the things they very carefully, very purposefully, never talked about. Nancy and Anna Guthrie were mother and daughter. They shared the same blood, but their relationship was like a tangled ball of yarn, full of secrets, quiet moments, and deep feelings hidden away. Even the people who knew them best didn't truly understand what was going on underneath the surface. What were they really like? Were they just a mom and her daughter dealing with normal family stuff? Or were they two people carrying hurts so deep that the truth of their story was locked away for many years, maybe forever? Here's what we do know. Every family has secrets, but the Guthrie family's secrets weren't small ones. They weren't like forgetting a birthday or a small fight that everyone tried to forget. These were big secrets that changed who they were, how they made choices, and left invisible marks on everyone they touched. And the saddest part is that the people who knew little pieces of the truth chose to stay quiet. Not because they were mean, but because of love or what they thought love meant. So today we're going to peek behind the curtain. We'll go into the quiet rooms of the Guthrie story and ask the questions that were not asked for too long. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do for your family and for yourself is to finally say it out loud. This is the hidden story of Nancy and Anna Guthrie. Picture a small town where everyone knows your name, but no one really knows your true story. It's the kind of place with rocking chairs on front porches, where neighbors wave hello without stopping, and where what people say about you travels faster than the truth. That was the world Nancy Guthrie grew up in, and in many ways, it was a world she never fully escaped. Nancy was not a woman who liked to be the center of attention. She was quiet, like very thoughtful people are quiet. She watched things carefully, choosing every word as if it cost her something. People who knew her when she was younger said she was charming in a soft way. Not the loudest person in the room, but often she was the one you remembered most after you left. She got married young, too young, some would say later, though no one said it to her face. The man she chose was steady and worked hard. He was the kind of person who made sure the lights stayed on and there was always food in the kitchen. But being steady, Nancy would slowly learn, isn't the same as being warm, and a full kitchen doesn't make a sad heart happy. Anna came into the world during one of the quietest times in Nancy's life. A winter birth, cold outside, and a bit difficult inside Nancy's heart. From the very beginning, Anna seemed to carry a seriousness beyond her years. Even as a baby, people who visited the Guthrie home would say, with love but also a little bit of worry, that Anna seemed to be watching, always watching. Mother and daughter. On the outside, a very normal story. A woman raising her child, doing her best with what she had. But if you look closer, the story starts to change. Nancy's quietness about certain things. Anna's questions that were always gently changed to another topic. The pictures on the shelf that had missing parts, faces cut out, frames turned a little away from view. There was always something unspoken living in that house. Not necessarily something bad, but something that wasn't finished, something that both women walked around for years without ever directly talking about. And that unspoken thing, whatever it was, would eventually shape everything Anna thought about herself. It would make her look for answers in places her mother never wanted her to look. It would lead her down paths that were uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but in the end, absolutely necessary. This is not a story about bad guys. It is not a story about blaming anyone. It is a story about two women who loved each other in the messy, not perfect, very human way that families love. And it's about the truths that love sometimes hides and sometimes finally lets free. Every secret has a beginning. A single moment, a single choice, a single door that quietly closes and is never opened again. For the Guthrie family, that moment happened long before Anna was old enough to understand anything around her. Nancy had a life before the one most people knew about. That might sound like a big deal, but it's simply true. In her early 20s, before she got married, before the small town, before the front porch and rocking chairs, Nancy had been someone completely different. She was freer, not so sure of herself, more alive in the way young people are alive when they haven't yet learned to be careful. She had relationships that changed her deeply. She had dreams that didn't fit neatly into the life she eventually chose. And she had a part of her life, one very important part, that she closed off so strongly, so intentionally, that she never spoke of it again. Not to her husband, not to her closest friends, and certainly not to Anna. Why, that's the question we should think about. Why do people hide parts of themselves that feel too hard to explain? Sometimes it's shame. Sometimes it's to protect themselves. Sometimes it's the quiet, sad belief that the truth would hurt the people you love more than staying quiet ever could. For Nancy, it was probably all three. She was a woman who dealt with pain by herself, who acted calm like it was a shield, and who truly believed, deep down, that some things were better left unsaid. But here's the thing about hidden truths. They don't just go away. They settle into a family's life like seeds in the dirt and grow quietly, stubbornly, in the most unexpected ways. Anna grew up in a house where questions seemed to disappear before she could even fully ask them. Not because Nancy was rude or ignored her. She wasn't, not because she was cold. In her own careful way, she was very loving. But there was a pattern. Certain topics made the air feel different. Certain names made something in Nancy's face close off, like a window shutting against the wind. Anna noticed this early. Children always do. They are the best at noticing feelings that adults think they've perfectly hidden. By the time Anna was a teenager, she had a list in her head, never written down, never spoken aloud, of topics that were quietly off-limits. Her mother's early adult years. Certain relatives on Nancy's side who were never talked about. A specific year in the middle of the 1970s that seemed to be a blank space in every family story. Anna didn't push, not at first. She had a bit of her mother's careful nature. She watched, she listened, she put things away in the back of her mind as she waited. For what exactly, she couldn't have said. But the questions kept growing because that's what unanswered questions do. They don't disappear with time. They get bigger. They become a part of who you are, where you come from, and that basic human need to understand who you are and why you are that way. Anna Guthrie was a young woman with roots she couldn't fully see. And that invisible, missing piece, quiet, always there, never giving up, would become the most important search of her entire adult life. It was a normal afternoon when everything changed for Anna. She was visiting her mother. Anna was in her late 20s by now, living in another city, building her own life. She found something in the back of a closet. She didn't mean to open a box that looked plain on the outside. The kind of cardboard box that could hold anything: old papers, holiday decorations, forgotten books. But this box held letters, handwritten letters tied together with a piece of string that had become soft and a little worn with age. Anna almost put them back, almost, but there was a name on the top envelope, a name she didn't recognize, written in handwriting that wasn't her mother's. The return address was from a city 3 states away. The date on the stamp was 1974. She stood in that closet for a long moment, the tiny dust particles floating in the air, the soft sound of her mother moving around in the kitchen below, and the letters in her hands carrying whatever heavy feelings they had been silently holding for decades. She didn't read them that day. She put them back carefully, exactly as she found them. But the image of that box stayed with her. It followed her home on the drive back to her city, sat beside her when she went to sleep, and was there again when she woke up. And she knew, with the kind of quiet certainty that comes from deep inside a person, that she would not be able to leave that question unanswered. Months passed before Anna talked about it with her mother. She needed time to think, to decide how to ask without causing hurt, to figure out what she really wanted: information, or understanding, or something softer and harder to name, like connection. When she finally asked, she did it simply. She sat across from Nancy at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten 1,000 normal meals, and said, "Mom, I found some letters in the closet from 1974. Who was sending you letters from out of state?" The quiet pause that followed was one of the longest of Anna's life. Nancy didn't say it wasn't true. She didn't act confused. She simply looked at her daughter for a long moment with an expression that Anna would later say was like someone finally putting down a very heavy bag. And then Nancy talked. Slowly at first, with pauses so long you could hear the house breathing around them. But she talked. What came out over the next few hours wasn't just one secret, but several woven together, each one explaining the next. There had been another relationship before Anna's father, serious enough that it had changed the path of Nancy's entire life. But real life is more complicated than that. And often, not always, but often, the truth feels different than we feared it would. For Anna, the new information was confusing. There's no softer way to say it. When the main parts of your family story change, even a little, the ground beneath you feels like it's moving. Suddenly, certain things that had never quite made sense, a specific tension during holidays, not wanting to look at old pictures, a quietness around certain years, clicked into place with a clear understanding that felt both good and deeply upsetting. She spent weeks after that conversation feeling a quiet sadness inside. Not angry, or not just angry. more like someone who had been reading a book with missing pages and had finally, unexpectedly, found them. She thought about what it meant to carry something for that long, what it costs a person to keep a secret, not for a year or two, but for decades. And she found to her own surprise that what she felt most strongly was not anger toward her mother, but something closer to grief. Grief for the younger Nancy, for the choices she made under pressure, for the years of silence that had quietly weighed on both of them without either one fully realizing how much. Nancy, for her part, didn't seem lighter after telling the truth. Not right away. Decades of keeping quiet don't disappear in one evening, but there was something in her face in the days that followed. A softness around the edges that Anna wasn't sure she had ever seen there before. The two women started talking differently after that. More carefully, yes, but also more honestly. Anna started asking questions she had never dared ask before. Not in a demanding way, never that, but curious and open, wondering where she might have been years earlier if only the chance had existed. And Nancy answered. Not all at once, not without thinking, but she answered. What came out over those weeks and months was a picture much more detailed than the one Anna had grown up with. Her mother had not been simply a quiet woman from a small town who married and raised a family. She had been a young woman with strong feelings, with mixed emotions, with a lot of love that had shown itself in unexpected ways. But in the end, her life was limited by the times she lived in, what people expected of her, and her own deep need to protect the people around her, even if it meant hiding her own full story. There is something both sad and beautiful about learning about a parent as a complete human being. It's a kind of growing up that happens not when you are a child, but in the long, complicated middle of adult life. The person Nancy had never spoken about was still alive. A man now in his 80s, living quietly with his own family. A whole life built in the space where Nancy's silence had kept a door closed. Anna found out his name from the letters. She didn't go looking for him right away. She sat with the knowledge for a while, feeling how important it was. Understanding that whatever she decided next would have effects not just for herself, but for people who had no idea this connection even existed. She talked to her mother about it. Long conversations, careful ones. Nancy was not against Anna knowing, but she was afraid. A very specific kind of afraid that comes not from feeling guilty, but from knowing that bringing the past into the present can have unexpected effects that are impossible to guess. I'm not ashamed of what happened, Nancy told Anna during one of those conversations. I want you to understand that. I was ashamed for a long time, but I'm not anymore. I'm just careful about what it would mean. For everyone. That difference mattered deeply to Anna. Her mother was not feeling shame. She was being thoughtful, thinking even now, even after decades, about how it would affect people she had once loved and people she had built a life with. That kind of steady, quiet thoughtfulness, even when it had shown itself as silence, was not something Anna could just ignore or criticize. It was, she began to realize, one of the most important parts of the woman who raised her. Anna did not reach out to the man from the letters. After a lot of thinking, after talking with her mother and with herself, she decided that just knowing was enough. That sometimes finding a truth doesn't mean you have to pull on every string it's attached to. That wisdom is partly knowing which doors to open and which ones to leave closed, with understanding instead of not knowing. What she learned from the whole experience was not a finished story with a perfect ending. Families usually don't offer those. What she learned was a richer, truer understanding of her mother, and through that, a richer, truer understanding of herself. She understood now where certain things in her own personality came from. Her quietness, her habit of thinking things through by herself, her need to protect the people she loved, sometimes at the cost of being completely open. She had inherited more from Nancy than her eye color or her way of tilting her head when she was thinking. She had inherited a whole way of feeling and reacting, one she could now see clearly for the first time, and therefore begin to understand better. The Guthrie family story didn't end with a big surprise or a public talk. It ended, or rather it kept going, with two women sitting across from each other at a kitchen table, talking more honestly than they ever had before, finding each other not as the simple versions of mother and daughter they had sometimes been, but as full, complicated, beautifully loving human beings. And that, quiet as it sounds, was everything. There's a reason stories like Nancy and Anna's stay with us long after we've finished hearing them. It's not because they're special or unusual. It's because in many ways they are not. Most families have their own version of the box in the closet, the letters never talked about, the years that get skipped over, the question that hangs in the air at family get-togethers and is always somehow never asked. And most of us have stood exactly where Anna stood, feeling the pull of a question that hasn't been answered, thinking about what it would cost to ask it, wondering whether the truth would bring us closer to the people we love or push us further apart. What Nancy and Anna's story gently suggests, without telling us what to do, is that honesty, even when it's hard, can make space for a deeper kind of love. Not right away, not without feeling a little uncomfortable, but eventually. If this story touched you, made you think of your own family, your own quiet moments, your own questions, that's not by chance. That's the whole point. We tell stories like this not to expose secrets, not to make things seem more exciting than they are, but to hold up a mirror. To remind ourselves that the people we love are always more than the simple versions of them we've been given, and that the bravest thing we can sometimes do for them and for ourselves is simply to ask. If this felt true to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have your own story, your own questions that haven't been answered, maybe today is the day to start finding the courage to ask them.